I'm a soil health specialist within RCS. You know, soil health has kind of been a hot topic lately, hadn't it? You know, about everything you read has got something about soil health in it. It's got cover crops or all kinds of biologic stuff, right? So what we're going to do is just have a little bit of a couple of little demonstrations, and then just a quick talk to kind of get you thinking about soil health, just to give you a little basic understanding of what we see as soil health. So a couple of demos that I want to do. You know, I grew up up in the edge of Putnam County, and which is where Philip Wise, one of the last guys, was here, just up the road from Philip a little ways. And you know, I grew up on a row crop and a livestock farm, and you know, my dad taught me all the things that he knew about soil, about, you know, we had to have good seed to soil contact, and we had to till it to get rid of the weeds, and we had to do all the things to prepare it. Went off to college, learned about all the chemistry side of it, right? Agronomy and NP and K and anions and cations and all of that kind of stuff, right? Then I went to work for NRCS and learned about the conservation side of it, you know, terraces and waterways and no-till and all the different things from that standpoint. And so, you know, I thought and started off working for NRCS, like you said, as a soil scientist. So I thought I knew a lot about the soil. You know, really thought I had a good handle on it. And then I went to a session a few years ago in Indiana, and this guy just kind of blew my mind a little bit on some of the misconceptions that I had about the soil. There was a lot of things that I thought I knew about the soil that just, you know, I came to realize just weren't quite true. And so some of the stuff that I'll talk about today is kind of some new science. You know, it's not that we didn't know it. You know, we knew that the soil was alive, didn't we? We knew it had worms and bacteria and fungi and all the stuff in it, but we didn't know exactly what it did. So a couple of things that they did at this meeting that helped me really understand, and I want to do the same thing for you, is I got a couple of different, you can call them whatever you want. You can call them pad-ons if you're a soil scientist. You can call them a clod if you're a farmer, right? So I've got one that's from a tilled field and one that's from a no-tilled field, both crop fields, but one's from a tilled crop field and one's from a no-tilled crop field. One of the things, and I better sit them down so I don't drop them. One of the things that they did at this meeting, they talked about aggregate stability, and that had been a term as a soil scientist that we'd known about it for a long time. You know, aggregate stability. We want soil particles that cling to each other, right? So what is it that makes up sand, silt, and clay? There's three things: sand, silt, and clay. I gave you the answer already. See, that's my ADD coming out. There's three things that make up soil: sand, silt, and clay, right? Little bitty particles. But yet, what I got right here, is this a little bitty particle of sand, silt, or clay? It's not, is it? So it's a whole bunch of those little particles being held together. All of the particles of sand, silt, and clay being held together. And so what is it that holds that together? You know, and I grab another one here. I can break them apart, can't I? And that's what we did with tillage, was we'd take them and break them apart so that we could get good seed to soil contact, right? I can break that. I'm making a mess for the cleaning people. Oh well. So I was telling somebody over there a while ago that you know, I'll try to keep you guys awake this afternoon. So they took these two clods or pad-ons and they stuck them in water. And this is kind of simulating what happens when it rains, okay? So obviously with rain, there's the pounding effect of the rain. All we're going to do, I got 2 jars with some screen wire in them, and I'll sit them here. So, and if you got to move around, just move around so you can see. I'm just going to set them in here, and then we're going to talk about what's happening to each one. Again, the tilled soil is here, and the no-tilled soil is here. Okay, everybody got that? Tilled, no-tilled. So I'm just going to set them in here. Now, as the water begins to rush in, okay, there's voids in that soil, right? The water works its way in those pore spaces, and as it does that, those individual particles of sand, silt, and clay that we talked about begin to what? Break apart. Obviously, this one is breaking apart a lot more, isn't it? Now, again, this is the tilled one. And you say, well, that's good though, right? You want crumbly soil. But what happens if it rains and your field is out there like this? It makes it easier to wash away, to erode, doesn't it? Okay? This one's just kind of sitting here. Oh, there's some pieces, some loose pieces falling off. But even if you look at the clarity of the water, there's huge differences, isn't there? And so what they started telling us at this meeting was that, yes, okay, they'd come to find out there's a substance in this soil. We knew there was earthworms and bacteria and fungi and nematodes and all this stuff in the soil. But what they discovered about 1996, 1997, some ARS scientists discovered this substance in the soil. It's called glomalin. It's actually a secretion that's given off by a particular kind of fungi in the soil. Fungi are very long filamentous organisms that grow in the soil or can grow in the soil. They act like glue so that when we have a pet on, they hold these particles together. They hold the little individual particles of sand, silt, and clay together. But if you look here, boy, that pet-on's completely dissolved, didn't it? So of this glue, of this glomalin that acts like a glue to hold these particles together, which of these do you think's got more glue in it? This one, right? This one didn't have any glue. That's because that fungi that creates that glue is a very long filamentous organism that grows in the soil, that lives in the soil. But any tillage that we do, any kind of disturbance, will kill that fungi, reduce its numbers, and reduce the amount of glue in the soil. Reduce the ability of these particles to adhere to one another in the presence of moisture. But moisture is important, isn't it? It takes moisture to make stuff grow. So we've got to have that water, but yet we want our soil to be held together. You know, we don't want it to, every time it rains, to dissolve and wash away, do we? So that was a really a new concept for me anyway, to understand that what that glue is, what that glomalin is in the soil. And again, it wasn't because I was stupid in college. You know, I didn't get A's, but I didn't flunk out either. Because they didn't even discover it until 1996, 1997. And then really, and that was the scientists discovering it. And then it really took about another 10 years for the science side of it to make it down to the folks in the field and for us to begin to understand this and what it truly meant from an erosion standpoint, from a standpoint of holding those nutrients and soil in your field. So then that after that demonstration, we were talking about aggregate stability. We wanted aggregates in the soil that were stable in the presence of water. And so, besides the fact of erosion, from an infiltration standpoint, why do we want those aggregates in the soil to be stable? This is a participatory talk. Where's Jerry at? Didn't Jerry tell you guys you had to participate to graduate today? So, he didn't say that? There's going to be a test. So, where does it, when it rains, okay, you got all these particles of soil out here. The soil's not solid, is it? It's not a solid particle. It's got all the particles of sand, silt, and clay, and it's got voids in it, right? It's got pore space. So when it rains, where does the water go? Does the water flow through the solid? It flows through the pore spaces, doesn't it? Right? So if we want good infiltration, we want those pore spaces to remain intact. Which means that the aggregates that we talked about, we want them to remain intact as well. Because if they collapse, what's going to happen to the voids, the pore spaces in the soil? They're going to fill up, aren't they? Okay? So, same two soils. Same two soils. We've got the tilled soil. We've got the no-tilled soil. Holes in the bottom here. Holes in the bottom here. We're going to make it rain is all we're going to do. Okay? And I apologize. I don't have any food coloring. I ran out. So, it's going to be clear. You're just going to have to watch. So, think about aggregate stability, okay, as it begins to rain. Aggregate stability and pore space. You didn't know I was talented. I could pour 2 cups at the same time, did you? So now, we'll watch that for a second. This is just crumbled up soil from a no-till field, crumbled up soil from a tilled field. Which one has better aggregate stability? Which one's going to have better infiltration? And again, this one was tilled. This actually was tilled. I crumbled this soil up and put it in here. So any of the earthworm holes, any structure was broken up. But it's because even though I broke it up, just like this jar right here, you know, it's still kind of hanging there, isn't it? The pore spaces, the aggregates remain in place. They crumble, but they still stay in some form, okay? They don't collapse into sand, silt, and clay, individual particles like this, okay? The sand and the silt has settled out. What's left in suspension? That's the clay particles, right? That's our streams right there, because that's what happens when we don't have stable aggregates. Now look at this, okay? We got pretty good infiltration here, didn't we? That probably was about a 4 or 5 inch rain right there. Most of it ran through. We got a little bit standing up there, okay? Again, this one hadn't ran through at all yet. And think about this though. We're creating hydraulic pressure here because we got water standing on top, don't we? If this was a field, where would this water have been? It'd have ran off, wouldn't it? Okay? But I thought we were taught that tilled soil, that loosens it up and fluffs it up so water will infiltrate, doesn't it? Isn't that what you guys were taught? That's exactly what I was taught. Tilled soil will infiltrate more water. Do you think that's true now? If it's tilled once because that glue is still there, so what reduces that glue? Okay. Well, if we've got, and you guys have seen this, you know, the last 3 or 4 years here, 5 years, we've seen a lot of pasture converted to cropland, you know. And in Missouri, in about the last 6 years, about 1.5 million acres of pasture to cropland. And you guys have seen it. You know, the first couple years, they break that sod out and till it. And boy, there's not much erosion, is there? Not much runoff. It looks pretty good. They say, you know, this field's going to farm okay. About 3 or 4 years down the road, boy, you get 1 inch or 2 of rain, and what happens? It just guts it, doesn't it? And that's because it takes that pasture, that sod, had a lot of fungi in it, had a lot of this glue to hold these soil particles together. And it takes a couple years of tillage to begin to chop up that fungi, reduce it, kill it. The glues go away, they dissolve, they get eaten as a food source by bacteria. As they go away, then about 2 or 3 years down the road, wow, you start getting massive erosion. And so that's the thing that I didn't understand about soils. You know, even working for a soil conservation agency for 20-some years and still didn't understand that part of it. So that was kind of a big thing to me. So I don't have a long time today. I wanted to show you those couple of demos right there. To get you to thinking about aggregate stability and what creates aggregate stability. If there's one thing I can make you understand is that, okay? Is trying to keep the soil stable. It's not about how many terraces you can put on. It's not about, you know, waterways, because all that's, you know, that's dealing with the aftermath, isn't it? It's about taking care of that soil and keeping it healthy and keeping it in condition to be able to absorb water right off the bat. It's not about catching something down here. It's about taking care of it right out here. And that's what we're going to run through. We're going to run through some basic soil health stuff here just for a little bit. We got till 5 o'clock. Isn't that what you said? Something like that? Okay, maybe not. So how do we define a healthy soil? You know, health is what? Health talks about something living, right? That's what, if you're healthy, you're living. You're right. It's something that's alive. It indicates that something is alive. So what would you think that a healthy soil would be? What would be a criteria that you would look at for a healthy soil? Come on, this is participatory talk. You got to answer. Living organisms. What else? If you were gonna look at a soil test, what would be something that you would look at? pH? Organic matter? CEC? A whole bunch of different things, right? So if we were going to look at a healthy soil, one, from my agency standpoint, we're going to say, I want a stable surface. I want very little erosion. Okay? And that's got to be our first thing, because, you know, it doesn't matter how much fertility you add. It doesn't matter all of the other things that you do. If it's all eroding, does it matter how much fertility you add if everything is washing away? It doesn't, does it? So job one has got to be to keep that surface stable. We also want to be at our maximum level of organic matter, soil organic carbon, or at least we need to be increasing, not decreasing. So organic matter, that probably to me is probably the number one thing that I would look at, because it's going to tell me so many other things. It's going to tell me infiltration, it's going to tell me available nutrients, it's going to tell me biologic activity, it's going to tell me a whole bunch of things, is that soil organic carbon or soil organic matter. Has a microbial population that efficiently decomposes those plant residues from the year before. Okay, because we want them to be recycled. We don't want them to be there forever. Well, we want ground cover, but we don't want those residues to be there forever. We want them to be cycled, to be incorporated back into the soil. We don't want to do it with tillage, though. We want them to be broken down by biology. And then we don't want to have excess nutrients or herbicides or pesticides in quantities that are gonna be washed away with a rainfall event. Okay. And most of all, we want it to be regenerative under its intended land use. If it's a crop field, then that's fine. It's a crop field. But we want it to be regenerative. Because, you know, that's one thing I have to applaud you guys. I saw a bunch of kids in a couple of sessions. You know, and I think all of us in here, we want our land to be in as good a shape or better when we give it to our kids, don't we? I think we'd all agree with that. Now, the problem is that up until, you know, a few years ago, there was just a lot of times we didn't really know how to do that. You know, we didn't understand the soil. We thought if we added enough N, P, and K to it that it'd solve everything. And that's just not the truth. Okay? So and that's what we're going to run through. So we want it to be regenerative. We want it to be better. We want it to improve. So is our soil unhealthy? You know, the canary in the mine, I already told you this, what I thought, was organic matter. You know, if I could look at any kind of test, biological, nutritive, anything, and look at one item, that one thing that would tell me more about the soil than anything would be organic matter. So what really determines the potential organic matter in a given area? Not what it is now, but what the potential is. Come on. I know it's after lunch. Y'all just had a big soda at lunch, so that ought to keep you awake, right? What do you think? Come on. You guys are sitting here in the front row. What does it take to make organic matter? Okay, and what does it take to make plant material? Water. Water. Okay? So, sunshine and water. Okay, so on one side you've got you got to have plant material, right? On the other side, what gets rid of that plant material? What did we talk about a minute ago? Biology, right? And I'm just gonna say all of it, okay? Because they all play a part. So on one side, to determine the potential in a given area, okay? So I got a friend that lives in Canada. He gets about 14 inches of moisture. Not a lot of water, does he? His organic matters are about 10-12% right now and going up. That's crazy, isn't it? He only gets 14 inches of water. How can his organic matter, because he doesn't grow that much material compared to us, but yet his organic matter is really high. So again, we got on this side of the equation, we grow organic material, and on this side, we decompose it. So his growing season, and really more correctly, his season of activity for biology to remineralize and break that plant material back into basic elements is pretty short. He says the only time it's never snowed where he's at in Saskatchewan is in July. And I was there 2 or 3 years ago in July and it was 40. It was pretty cold. So he doesn't get a lot of moisture to grow a lot of material, but it's not broken back down into basic elements. So his equilibrium level, the level that's achieved in his soil based on how much he can grow and how fast it's broken back down, is pretty high because it doesn't break down very fast. Okay? Got another friend that lives in North Carolina. 50 inches of rain. They grow a lot of material. But their organic matter, the best they can get is about 3%. And that's under really, really good conditions. Their crop fields are 0.5%. That's because they get a lot of moisture, can grow a lot of material, but they have a year-round growing season essentially. Maybe not growing, but a year-round biologic activity season. So that plant material that they grow is broken back down into basic elements very quickly. It's remineralized very quickly. So their potential, their equilibrium level with their climate and their growth and their biology is fairly low. So what do you think our potential is kind of here where we're at in the middle of the two? 4 or 5, somebody says. I'd probably say, where we're at here in Columbia, probably 6 or 8. North Missouri, maybe 8 or 9. I've got some stuff in the 5s already. I got a friend up by Maryville that's got some stuff in the 7s. I know a guy up by Moberly and this is grass now, okay, not crop, this is grass, in the 6s. So why do we not why are we so low compared to what our potential could be? Okay? We'll get into that. So this is a study out of North Dakota, and there's different ones around the country that shows that with tillage, as we till the soil in about 20 years, we typically will drop it in about half. Because as we till the soil, we not only reduce the biologic activity, but we also, some forms of biologic activity, we increase other forms that remineralize that soil faster. And you say, well, isn't that good? Well, we want it to be remineralized, but we don't want that organic matter to be in a losing condition. We want it to be gaining. Okay? We want it to be gaining because of all the other things that it does. So what's the most limiting natural resource? We talked about this a minute ago. I'm trying to go fast because we don't have all day. Water, right? Water is our critical thing. We can't control sunshine, can we? I mean, you can affect leaf surface area and some different things there. Minerals, obviously, with fertility, we can deal with that. Water, unless you're talking irrigation. Water is obviously our most limiting issue. And when we look at the soil, when we look at this infiltration or lack of infiltration that we're causing right here, You know, we get 30 some inches of rain, right? 36, depends on where you're at, 38. But how much of it do we truly capture if it's all running off? If it was a situation like this, you know, we just got a 4-inch rain, but most of it, because it wouldn't have stood here and soaked in, would it? It would have all been run off. Most of the stuff that we do, I do a rainfall simulator demonstration, and most of that, if we rain an inch, we'll lose about 90% of it on a bare tilled field. Here's the one that'll scare you. You know, I did it last week down at Jeff City with 2 trays of hay fields. And these were hay fields that had effluent hog manure applied to them for probably 8 or 10 years. It would scare you how much runoff we got off of that. It really would. It was a hay field that had tall residual on it. We probably got 75% runoff off of a tall hay field. Because a hay field is a disturbance, and we're not going to get too deep into that today, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. So the water cycle is the most critical part of the whole soil system. Okay? The water cycle, how much water we get to infiltrate. That's the key. It doesn't matter if you if you get 36 inches of moisture, if you only capture 6 or 8 of it, does it? We're creating our own droughts with the condition of our soil and how we're impacting it. So that water cycle, this right here, this surface, this interaction at the surface, that's what we've got to focus on. We've got to make sure that everything we do to the soil allows the most infiltration we can get. Because again, it doesn't matter if it rains 36. What it matters is how much you capture. How much soaks in. I think our water cycle's broken. Here's a study that shows a disc field with no cover, a disc field with residue on it, no tillage with no cover, and tilled with cover. Or I'm sorry, no tilled with cover. And these are all 4 to 6% slopes. Okay? This was a 6-year study that Dr. Rakowski did. So they looked at here at the tilled soil, they had 119 ton of soil loss in 6 years on 3 to 6% slope. The kicker was 89% of it was lost in 3 events. So it's those big rains that we get. It's those 4-inch rains that we get that cause the biggest amount of erosion. You know, I mean, how many of you guys had terraces overtopped this last year with some of the rains, right? Had rills that cut. Because you know, it doesn't matter if we keep it in pretty good shape for the little rains. The ones that are damaged, are the little rains damaging? The little rains aren't damaging, are they? It's the big rains. So if we don't have our soil in condition to handle the big rains, that's when we lose all of our soil, is the big rains. Okay? Same study. 7 ton of soil loss. Right here. With those same events. So what does the tillage do to it? How does it affect it so that it does that? So these two trays right here are the same soil. Only difference is 17 years of tillage. It took to go from a forest soil to that. You see the difference in color? You see the difference in consolidation? And we'll talk about it. We'll look at it, some more pictures here in a minute. So what happens from a physical standpoint to that soil? Okay? So we've got different kinds of properties. We have inherent soil properties, things that you really can't influence. The climate. You know, you can't affect, I mean, you could move, I suppose, but you can't affect the climate, the topography, the native vegetation. Was it prairie soil? Was it a timbered soil? The parent material, was it North Missouri glacial soils? Was it older soils in South Missouri? That's really stuff you're probably not going to have a huge impact on unless you are willing to move. The dynamic soil properties, those are things that you can impact. Organic matter, the soil structure, the infiltration rate, the bulk density. Bulk density is simply a measure of pore space. Bulk density is simply a measure of how much, by percentage, how much of the soil is in a void, okay? And then infiltration rate, water holding capacity, nutrient holding capacity. So this soil right over here, okay, as a piece of equipment comes through it and begins to slice it and chop it, okay, when they're building a highway and they're hauling dirt, they're bringing soil in, okay, they're moving it from one hill to another. What do they do to prepare that soil to get ready for that road grade to go in? They use a sheep's foot, a disc, okay? They use a disc. Let's think about that. Okay, they're using a disc. What are they doing with a disc? They're using it to chop and size those soil particles, aren't they? So they can be more easily compacted. If we're using a piece of equipment in our crop field, we're doing the same thing. We're chopping and sizing those soil particles. As we chop and size them, what happens to that pore space? Okay? So we need to think, we need to begin to think of that soil as an ecosystem. You know, I mean, if you guys have all got hogs, right? You worry about the feed, their habitat, you know, their water, nutrition. You worry about all that. The same with wildlife biologists. You know, food, cover, those are the things that they all preach. It's the same with the soil. We have to think of that soil as an ecosystem for living, breathing organisms. Okay, this is an ecosystem that's not functioning, that's not working for those organisms that are needed to make it healthy. Okay, this is just a study out of Texas years ago that showed that as the soil temperature gets higher, at 100% of the moisture is used for plant growth. As it goes on up, the organisms begin to die. You know, we've seen, and I don't have it on here, we've seen differences of 30 to 40 degrees difference between a covered soil and a bare soil 4 or 5 feet apart. Okay? 4 or 5 feet apart, a covered soil and a bare soil, 40 degrees difference in temperature. We have to start thinking of that soil as an ecosystem, as habitat for our wildlife, for our livestock. You know, so that disturbance, you know, you guys have seen it. As we disturb the soil, what happens? You get a flush of weeds, don't you? Because and there's all kinds of science behind it. You know, you got bare soil, so you're mixing those weed seeds in so they get a little sunlight, or they don't get sunlight and they begin to germinate. All of that, right? So we're going to increase that weed population. It destroys the pores by that shearing and smashing that we talked about. It diminishes that soil's ability to respire. You know, those organisms are just like you and I. They need air to breathe. If we cut off all those pore spaces, what do we do to that airflow in and out of that soil? How long, if I put a plastic bag over your head, how long are you going to make it? Not very long, right? Depends on how long I can hold you down. It's the same with the soil. Even if there's good structure down into the soil, if you come in with a shallow piece of tillage equipment, even a vertical tillage tool, and you stir that surface, 1 inch is all it takes to seal that surface and change that airflow in and out of that soil, to change the water flow in and out of that soil. And then it simplifies the soil organisms over time. Fungi, more than anything, because they're this very long filamentous organism in a healthy soil, they can get very, very long. They are the ones that suffer more than anything else, but yet they are the ones that do so many things for us. You know, this is some stuff back from a few years ago that they estimated that half of the fertility used each year simply replaces nutrients that are lost by erosion. Okay? Half of every dollar bill that we spend on fertility, we don't get a return from. But yeah, why do we say we have to till? So you can plant earlier? Do what? Loosen the soil. Get rid of them stinking hard corn stalks, huh? You got to get rid of residue. Get rid of the weeds. Okay. A big one anymore. You know, we got chemicals that can take care of the weeds, and we got all this other stuff that deals with everything, right? If you got a problem, we got something that'll solve it. But we got to break down that residue. Oh, I can't have all that material. It's covering the soil, right? So here's just a quick video. If you're scared of wildlife, you can leave the room. Is it going? And we got almost too much light. We got earthworms here. These are weightlifting earthworms. Can you see that at all? Sorta. So if we have a healthy soil, they're going to take care of that residue for us. What they do, you can see him pulling it back to his hole here. This is the power lifter here. They will take care of the residue for us if we have a healthy soil. The earthworms themselves don't actually eat the residue. They act as a food source. They actually size it and chop it up, and the bacteria and the fungi eat it, and then the earthworms eat the bacteria and fungi, basically. Okay? They're using it as bait, is what they're doing. They're pulling it back to their hole, they chop it up so that it attracts the other biology in the soil. But anything that we do that reduces these guys, how many of you are scared to go out into crop field at night now? Huh? You didn't know they could do that, did you? You just thought they were good for fishing. So, here's another one. So he's got his hole, his midden is right here, and he's pulling it all down in. He's pulling all that down in close to him so that it will attract all the other organisms that he can then use. I've seen fields that had a complete surface covered of corn stalks, and a month later, once the soil warmed up and got biologic activity, it was almost all gone, except for the earthworm middens. I saw a field up in Atchison County, and there was no residue. They called me. They said we were concerned they didn't have any residue. You know, you got a big tall corn plant. This was bean residue, and all that was left was little piles. They said we don't know what all these little piles are, and there was little piles of chopped up soybean stubble with a little mound of soil, and that was the earthworm middens. And there was one of those every 6 or 8 inches across the whole field. But the residue was completely gone. And that was because it had been a long-term no-tilled field. So soil health in a cropping situation has really got to start with no-till. That's just where it begins, folks. I mean, you know, we talk about cover crops, we talk about all these other things, but it really has to begin with no-till. So, and I got to speed up here. So this is just a quick shot, a microscopic shot again of soil that's not been tilled, but it's crumbled up. Okay, and this is a microscopic shot, and this is soil that's been tilled. Again, look at the pore space. What we're looking at is the pore space. That's the most important part of the soil. The nothingness is the most important part. Doesn't matter if you've got all the fertility in the world, if you have no pore space to get water infiltration and air infiltration, you're not going to be able to utilize that fertility. So this is a great shot. This is 2 beakers, again, of crumbled up soil. We're going to add water to them. And what happens to that aggregate stability? Okay, this is an easy test you can go home and do in your own field. Okay, we talk about compaction. look at the compaction that occurred here. We dropped the surface an inch in this beaker simply by adding water and having all the pore spaces compressed out. We're not talking about a tractor driving across it. We're not talking about rain pounding on it. We're talking about a beaker of water standing there, collapsing all the pore spaces. That's what tillage is doing to us right there. We got to have water-stable aggregates. You know, it's all about biology. It's about having thousands of pounds of organisms in the soil of livestock. Do you, with purpose and with thought, feed your soil livestock? You go take care. I'm a cow guy. I go out and take care of my cows. You go take care of your hogs. Do you take care of the organisms in your soil? Do you put purpose and thought into feeding them? You know, it's all about the exudates that the plants give off. The plants also attract them. They use up to 50%, in some cases up to 50% of the energy that they derive from the nutrients that we apply and from the photosynthesis, the sunlight. They take 50% of that energy and give off root exudates that attract biology, that attract organisms, because that's where the majority of the nutrients that our plants need come from. It doesn't come, it comes from the fertility maybe that we add, but that's not absorbed directly by the roots. In most cases, the roots in a cornfield make up what percent of that soil? How much of the soil does a root, does a percentage, by a percentage, does that corn roots touch of the soil? About 2%. Okay? About 2%. So most of the time, those nutrients are brought to that plant by those organisms that the plant is attracting. The number one food source of most of those organisms is a living root, is that root in the soil. These living roots release these organic substances, these exudates into the soil that attracts these other organisms. And then one eats another one, and then they give off, you know, the effluent, and then the plant takes it up. That's the system. We're not going to get into that. The number of organisms in that rhizosphere, this zone right around the root, is about 2,000 times higher than out in the general soil. Okay? This is a root. Think about how much of the soil that this root is touching and then how much of the soil it's touching the nutrients, the water, with mycorrhizal fungi attached to it. We can, in some cases, get as much as 40 or 50% of the soil can be touched by mycorrhizal fungi, as opposed to 2% that's touched by a plant root. Would you rather have 40 or 50% of the nutrients available to your plant, or 2% of the nutrients that's in your field available to your plant? We got to have a living soil, and we got to understand that. And we're not going to get all the way to that today. I'll blow through that one. Here's a great video. This is what we're talking about. It's alive. The soil, it's not this dead, inert medium that we have to apply nutrients to. It's a living, breathing organism. These are all this one's feeding on some organic matter right there. Okay? All kinds of different things in the soil. Now, you know, to teach you what all those look like, or what all those do, man, it's going to take a whole nother hour, which we don't have, right? We got to talk about restoring the soil with soil health. That's the message that's going across the country today. You know, is soil health, is understanding soil health. This was just a little glimmer of what we understand now. We don't understand it all, but we know a whole lot more than we did even 10 years ago. Okay? This is kind of NRCS's approach. The 4 or 5 things that we really talk about: manage more by disturbing less, going to no-till, using diversity, keeping a living root in the field all year long to feed that soil livestock, not having that downtime in the winter when there's nothing growing, and then keeping the soil covered, because cover is important. Keeping that soil covered from that energy, from the effects of the rain, and then integrating livestock back in. You know, Grazing livestock, you know, you guys are doing that probably in a better way than a lot of people are by integrating that effluent back in. The quality of our lives depends on the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. All of those things depend on the quality of the soil. There's tons of books out there. I thought I had some websites. There's tons of books out there. This one right here, Teeming with Microbes, that's a really simple one to understand the biology. It's actually a gardener's book, but it's pretty simple to understand.